Could you state your name and then, in just a couple of sentences, explain to a general public visitor your expertise and interest in AI?
Sure. My name is Adam Cheyer. I'm currently VP of AI Experience at Airbnb. I've spent 40 years or so professionally as an AI researcher and developer and entrepreneur. I was co-founder of Siri. Um, I was co-founder of Viv Labs, which was a Siri 2.0 company that sold to Samsung. I was first developer and founding member of change.org, the world's largest petition platform with today over 500 million members. And I was co-founder of Sentient.ai, one of the first large-scale machine learning platform companies. And my last startup, which brought me to Airbnb, was called GamePlanner.ai, where we were trying to build a set of tools to help humanity make better decisions.
And how does that fit into Airbnb?
Well, Airbnb is best when you go for group travel. If you're an individual traveler, a hotel room is fine. But if you're traveling with a group, there are huge benefits with your family, with multiple parties. And there, collaborative decision making is a huge issue. And a lot of the techniques and ideas that we have apply well to what Airbnb's current business, and Airbnb has aspirations to do far more than their core business, which is short-term rentals. They really want to be in the business of human connection and be able to play everywhere that trust among different parties is important.
So, if you could talk again, you said it before we were recording, just about how you've had the same vision for 31 years. And if you could talk about that and contrast it briefly with where we are with LLMs.
Sure. So my first version of a Siri-like system was 31 years ago in 1993. I was working at SRI International with Phil Cohen and a few others. And at the time, this was before a web browser. So if you recall, most people they had a laptop or a desktop on their desk. They had to load it up with software from CD-ROMs and floppy drives, and they would compute using what was loaded onto their local computer. And I said, someday there will be content and services around the world that you'll want to access and use. We'll need a way to discover those and to interact with them. And the idea of using hyperlinked multimedia documents was not how I was thinking about it at the time. I thought everyone would have a personal assistant. You could communicate with it using graphical interfaces, using language, speech, text, typing, tapping. And you would say, I want to know this, or I want to do that. And the job of the assistant would be to take your request, break it down into sub-pieces, route it to the right machines around the world to retrieve content or perform actions, present and interact with you during this process, and basically just help you get the job done. And so that's been my consistent vision. Siri was a step forward into that, where for the first time you could really use language and graphical interfaces together to achieve all sorts of tasks, booking a movie, making a restaurant reservation, calling a cab, and much, much more. We then sold our company to Apple. Apple took it to a new level of scale in multiple languages and many devices, from TVs to phones to watches. I then did a company called Viv Labs, which was really about how could you open this up, like the internet or the App Store. The idea of Siri, in my mind, was always to start with 10 or 15 great apps, just like the iPhone did when it first came out. But the whole idea from that original vision was to open it up to an ecosystem where any developer, any business could publish their capabilities, their content into a service, into an app store, and users could form the perfect assistant that they wanted out of the brands that they know and trust. They say, I like this one, I like that one, I don't like that one, let me assemble it. Very much like you do with mobile. You know, your mobile experience is different than mine because you have a slightly different set of apps on it, and that defines the constraints of your mobile experience. I imagine such a thing, but for a voice assistant, and with VivLabs, we built that. I wanted you to be able to not only task individual services, but through language, you can use the power of a higher level task that involves multiple ones. Get me a ride from my hotel to the restaurant. And different services need to be involved to get that achieved. So we sold to Samsung. We launched on about 500 million devices. We had more than 1,000 developers building this store. Unfortunately, it wasn't a market success. There was not a lot of messaging or marketing around our technology. Competitors with bigger names like Google and Alexa were preferred assistants since people had heard of them. And so that did not make the commercial market. And then, as you know, LLMs, ChatGPT, and others have emerged. I think they are incredible. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about them. But for me, AI can be thought of as knowing and doing. I want to know this and I want to do that. Goes back to those words from 31 years ago. And today, LLMs are fantastic on the knowing side. You can ask any question and it will respond intelligently, seemingly intelligently, and give a very nice, cohesive answer in a conversational way. But on the doing side, the execution side, we still are not there. And this idea of a two-sided marketplace where there are consumers who use an assistant and there are businesses who can provide content and capability, that second side is missing today with LLMs because brands want to have some control and visibility that when their service gets used, it's used in the way they want. They want to access consumer information and have some interaction with the consumer. And there's no way to do that using today's LLMs. So that's a little bit about my long-term vision. I think we're getting closer to what I've always dreamed of and tried to make come true, but we are still falling short today.
Actually, one of the later questions I had, but makes sense now, is do you see alternative approaches, rather than, LLMs are obviously the rage right now, but do we need to explore alternative approaches to AI? And is there a way to combine, for instance, the LLM front end with a back end, more like a constellation of services as you had worked on in the past?
Absolutely. It's funny. I've been in, as I mentioned, nearly 40 years in AI. And every few years, what AI means changes. So in the 80s, when I was working then, it was all about expert systems. And that was the only thing people cared about. In the 90s, it was all about intelligent agent architectures. And that was the rage. And that's what AI was and meant. In the 2000s, not much happened. But then maybe
statistical machine learning took off.
A little bit, but it was in smaller ways in 2010s. For me, statistical machine learning really broke through in the 2010s. So from my perspective, in the labs, yes, but commercially, not yet in a big way. So there was big data was being talked about, but it wasn't as focused. So AI might have been more big data, but it wasn't mentioned as much as artificial intelligence. I remember when Steve Jobs acquired Siri in 2010, he went on stage at All Things Digital, D8, and Walt Mossberg said, "Why did you buy Siri, that search company?" And maybe you could say AI was really search with the rise of Google and all of that. And he goes, they're not a search company, they're an AI company. And no one really knew what he meant because the words artificial intelligence really hadn't been used in popular commercial press for 20 years, since the 80s. It was called other things, perhaps. But all of a sudden, 2010, Siri gets acquired, and like the drip, drip, drip of a dam breaking, AI was everywhere. IBM Watson beat the world's best Jeopardy playing program. The movie Her comes out. Apple, Siri comes out. Google buys 8 robot companies. And now, and on and on and on. Tesla comes out 2015 with the self-driving cars. AI is back in vogue as a term. And at that time, it was largely deep learning was what AI was. It was, and to me, it's interesting because AI has always been a very broad field. There's language understanding and dialogue and ontologies and representation and reasoning. And machine learning was just one little piece, action architectures. And then AI was machine learning, but not just machine learning. It was only the neural net part of machine learning. Genetic algorithms and all these other techniques we had, those were put by the wayside. And it wasn't just neural nets, it was a certain type of neural nets, backpropagation, reinforcement learning. And not just neural nets and reinforcement learning, it was a certain having multiple layers. So the definition
Transformers within that.
is very wide. And what AI is, like, it just kind of moves around and focus, and that's AI. And if you're not doing AI unless you're doing that precise method and technique that's in vogue at the moment. And today, AI means LLMs. 3 years ago, AI meant something different, right? And so when you say, are there other things necessary? Will we need something else besides LLMs? First of all, LLMs are incredible. I think they may be the most important tool humanity has ever created, right? Which is a huge statement, for good and for bad. But for me, it's a tool, but it's a tool that allows and enables humans to do things that they could not do without it at an intellectual level. And there's not many tools, the computer certainly, and the calculator, but to really enhance creativity and knowledge, there's never been a tool like this before. So I don't want to diminish how important I think this breakthrough is. And yet, people talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence. Could we create a system as intelligent, as generally intelligent as a human? And I still believe humans are special. The human mind is special. And even though in some ways this can simulate or emulate human-like response, and I believe, the Turing test, which was the test of AI for many years, has absolutely been beaten by this technology. But I do not believe LLMs alone will get us to human-level general intelligence. So I do think other techniques will be needed. I think LLMs will play a role, but we're not there yet. And in my opinion, this particular method and technique will get us closer, but not all the way.
So what else is needed?
Many things. So I have, many people are saying, well, look how fast they're improving. And I have a bet on longbets.org. So readers can challenge me, or future people can see if I was right or not. Self-driving cars are a big rage right now. And you can go into San Francisco today, and there are plenty of cars driving around San Francisco with no driver. So my bet is, I believe that there will not be a car that a consumer can buy that's equivalent functionally to a non-self-driving car that everyone has today. that can go from any drivable place to any drivable place, and it doesn't have a steering wheel. By 2048 is what I said. I picked 25 years from when I made the bet last year. If we had artificial general intelligence, driving a car, it's something just about any adult can do. Well, if we have something that's supposed to be able to do everything humans can do, as intelligent as humans, obviously it should be able to do something simple as just drive a car. That should just fall out if you have an AGI system. I predict we will not have a car a consumer can buy without a steering wheel before 2048. So we'll see. But what's missing? Certainly the action side of things, the physicality, how the world works, how to manipulate, I think is still missing. The reasoning capabilities, humans have different types of reasoning capabilities, and LLMs simulate some of them, but not all of them. And you need those reasoning capabilities to handle non-common use cases, which we do every day that we do. If you imagine you come to an intersection, but the stoplight is broken, and all of a sudden all the cars are like jockeying for position, and we can look each other in the eye and know, should I go or should you go, even if there are no rules of the road. We'll figure it out as humans. And part of it is physical, part of it is communication, part of it is reasoning capabilities. If we come to a gate, I live in this gated community and the doors are closed. How can you figure out where does your car go to drive up to? Because there's multiple gates and certain ones should open, etc. I don't see self-driving cars being able to reason. And we do this effortlessly. So I think there are just so many corner cases that are not common. And humans learn from just a few examples. LLMs in some ways learn a little bit from just a few examples, but they do not have the reasoning capabilities, the action capabilities, the physical capabilities that humans have. And so I think there's a lot missing.
So some experts say that LLM chatbots are stochastic parrots that only give the appearance of understanding, while other experts say they're emergent learners that actually do understand things about the world. Which is it?
So I've been working in conversational AI and machine learning for decades. When I first came into LLMs, I know the algorithms. I've worked with people who've been using them for years and years, and some of the pioneers who worked on it. I came to the problem with a human bias. Oh, these things are trained based on probabilities how to predict the next word. It can generate a love poem, but it doesn't understand what a love poem means. It doesn't understand the text that it's superficially producing. That was my initial bias. And then there was a moment when it flipped for me. And it was related to coding. So I was interacting with an LLM and I said, write me a program that'll do, and I kind of described a function. And it generated text and it was perfect. I go, yeah, but probably 10,000 people, it has seen 10,000 instances of functions that are basically exactly that. And it's just regurgitating probabilistically. When I send these words, it just generated the function. And then I responded, I said, you idiot, you got this wrong, even though it didn't. Don't you know that this is true? Which it wasn't. But it said, I'm sorry, I will fix it. And it took my false assertion and it rewrote the program to take that new false assertion into account. And I went, whoa. I know that no one in history has taken this function and said this is true, because it's not true. I'm going to assume that. And a program is an intricate set of lines of code and logic. So to add a novel component and to not break the previous functionality, to correctly update a program, it needs to have an understanding of the program. It needs to know what every line is for. I'm like, how do you do that probabilistically? I go, it has to have a model. It has to know what loops are and variables are, and it needs to be kind of following it through. I couldn't see any other way. And as soon as I flipped on that example, that it needs to understand the program it's written in order to update it correctly with a novel piece, then I started to look at every interaction I had with an LLM. And it became clear to me that at some level, it does have understanding. Now, is it human level understanding? No. But it has a model of the world and how it works. And it has the ability to infer and make inferences and leverage that model to accomplish tasks, to make inferences. And, so that was the most shocking thing that's happened to me in my career. So it was a big moment. And you can see it everywhere. I would say I'm planning my 25th wedding anniversary. Help me plan a trip. And what did it do? It said, congratulations on your wedding anniversary. Now, here's your trip. I'm like, how did it know that? How did it understand that that's the right human-like response? It's not. And then there was nuances of romance woven into every decision that it made. And there's a million of these kind of things. I just thought, oh, it has a model. And the irony is, for decades, the holy grail of AI was to try to figure out what's the representation and reasoning approach. Is it probabilistic or is it logic-based? How do we get all the knowledge in? All the things we don't say. Dogs have 4 legs. Well, most of the time.
Yeah,
there are exceptions. No one writes that down because we all know it. And yet, this basically fell out as a side effect of trying to predict the next word. So we weren't doing transformer architectures because we wanted it to build a knowledge base and an understanding of everything. It just turned out that mathematically, in order to predict the next word, the most efficient way was to build a compressed model of everything. So that, to me, I don't think was the intention of those working on those problems, but it was a discovered side effect. And that's the breakthrough that just floors me every day. So I would say it's not just a stochastic parrot. It has a model, it can understand, and it can use that understanding, meaning it builds a model, it fits it into a model, and it can infer using that model. And that's remarkable.
And you talk about the fact that it can execute, like, right, revising that program. So why is that not the basis for the kind of do engine or the action-oriented part of your vision?
Sure. So doing means different things. So it does have the capability to write limited programs and plans. So there's the beginning of what's required, of breaking things down into steps and refining those steps and understanding logic-based constructs. So there are elements there, but there are other aspects of do that I think are missing. So first is live web service calls. In order to do things on the web, there are 2 million apps in the App Store. Most of them have content and services. You can search things and you can buy things and do things and make a reservation, send a ticket, effectuate change. So live web services is an important component. Now, you could say LLMs today can call live web services a little bit, but not nearly at the scale that they need to. There are millions of services out there, and you can't load in today millions of services and have a system that can reason about how to combine those services and how do I go to the restaurant and then take that address and paste it in over here to where what I want to find next, and then go to the cab. The scale isn't there. The reasoning capabilities, the capacity to understand millions of APIs. A human goes to so many different websites, and we can figure out how to get done what we need. We are not there yet. Additionally, in my conception of knowing and doing assistant, both a consumer wants one interface across every device. So I want to talk to it, or I want to use a GUI, but I want to have one assistant, not 10,000 assistants. One assistant to get the job done. But businesses need to be able to plug and play their content, their APIs, their capabilities, their authentications, their branding, they want some control. And that app store, if you will, is not available today in LLMs for a variety of reasons. So for me, I think the large language models have primarily started on the knowing side. They've built up this massive knowledge index or model, and they can use that to do some types of inferences, but the ability to reason about change and side effects, it's not quite the same as writing a simple function. You need to have the huge library of all the functions, and you need to have a method for updating them and calling them and coordinating them and converting. So could it get there? I think so. Could we get there augmented with some additional technology faster? I think so, but we're not there yet. If you look at what we did at Viv Labs, I actually think, even though this was early, 2012 I stayed there for 8 years through 2020, I actually think the relevance of what we've done is more now than ever, because it was all about writing these complex programs that could call and reason about live web services and learn from them through the execution of it. And ChatGPT today doesn't have anything. If you go back to the 2016 Wired article, Stephen Levy gave an example to our system, and on the fly, it produced a program for this question. He said, on the way to my brother's house, I need to pick up some good wine that goes well with lasagna. And from that free language request, some large number of services were woven on the fly into a program where it would query your contact database and say, which brother? You have 2 brothers. And then it would learn which brother is traditionally referred to. Where does he live? I'll go to the contacts. Let's get a mapping program. Oh, where are the wine stores along the way? What kind of food is lasagna? What are its ingredients? How do I classify that? On and on and on. That's a complex program. I don't believe that anything today is able to do that query, and then give the appropriate instructions and interactions while we're having a dialogue. It's asking questions, learning, continuing. So I think technologies woven together with LLMs will produce the doing side more, but we're not there yet today.
And you brought up that there is kind of an emergent model that came with LLMs, which was a surprise. But one of the issues, I believe, is explainability, that it's very hard to know what that model is or how to change it. Could you talk about, help the general public visitor understand the issue of explainability with today's LLMs?
Sure. So I'll answer that by starting just a simple primer on what an LLM is. Basically, it's been trained to generate text. What an LLM does well is create stories. It creates stories. So when you think of it, you can think of it as an eager writer trying to write a story that will please you. And in the implementation of LLMs, obviously it's based on probabilities that it's learned from all sorts of text it's consumed. There's a parameter called temperature. And you literally can move it up and down. And the temperature parameter basically says, should I use the most reliable word or the highest probability word, or should I occasionally go down a little bit and choose another option? So if I said John hit the number one word that follows John hit the is probably ball. You know, maybe wall is not that far down. Penguin, probably way down on the list. But instead of always saying John hit the ball, if you do temperature, maybe it'll choose ball, maybe it'll choose wall, or further down. So LLMs are not truth-telling. Their goal is not to be the most accurate. Researchers found if you have this temperature parameter and you set it more, you get more creative and actually better quality results. So we get to explainability, and you've probably heard about hallucinations. Imagine you're trying to make an important decision. What should I do? It will write a beautiful reason story and says, you should do this. And then you say, why? It will write a beautiful story. Well, here's how I decided that you should do this. But is it really how it decided? No, it's a story about what it thinks you want to hear about how it decided. Because you can hit the refresh button on the why, and it will generate another explanation. Oh, I gave you this answer because of a different way. Here's how I decided. So explainability is a problem because an LLM, and probably even humans, don't really know how they come to the conclusions that they did. They try to generate a story that justifies, that sounds plausible as a plausible explanation, but it's not the real truth of the matter. And with LLMs, it's so present because you just keep hitting refresh and you're getting 10 different reasons. You know, like they can't all be the reason. Which is it? So it's not telling you the real answer. Now, why is that a problem? If you're doing a major decision, you say, what college should I send my son to? It says, oh, Harvard. Why? Here's the reasons. It could be useful, but without explainability, am I just going to take the answer for such an important decision and just do it because an LLM said so? It makes stuff up a lot of the time. There's hallucinations. It will fabricate information to support its story if it doesn't know something. I believe, especially for decision-making, humans want some level of transparency and some level of control. No one would just say, oh, LLM said Harvard, that's where I'm going to send my son. No, they're going to think about it. They want to work. Well, let me look at what's the quality of the campus? What's the education? Is it a good fit? How's the social life? Let me look and compare and contrast. And for important decisions, I believe transparency is an important component, and control, meaning I want to adjust knobs and turn dials. LLM are fantastic to help me think about new criteria, new ideas about what I should consider. Let me be creative, but I think for important decisions, something more than just an LLM that gives you an answer, but you don't know if it's an accurate answer or a made-up answer. You can't really understand if how it came to that answer. It'll make up a story, but that's not how it was. I think people will need more. But so they're useful, but as long as people remember they're storytelling agents, not truth-telling agents, the stories can be useful, but you need to take them with a grain of salt.
And this is certainly particularly true of LLMs. I mean, obviously, symbolic AI was easier to roll back and see how a decision was made in an expert system. Even statistical, there's some ability to go back and figure out what created the goals.
Absolutely. I mean, these things are trained, they're so large, they're very unpredictable. I heard an AI researcher said working with an LLM is kind of like working with a horse, in that you can say, um, when you ask something, sometimes it might do what you say, but not what you mean. Sometimes it might do what you mean, but not what you said. And sometimes it will do neither. And like it has a mind of its own, an uncontrollability. Oftentimes it's useful and surprising and brilliant, but it's not, you don't have direct control of these. You don't have understanding. Just the way they're built, the mathematics and the scale, the compute is so massive. It's like looking into another brain and trying to understand by looking at the neurons what happened. So it's an issue. But again, for me, are they a plus or a minus? We can get into that, but they are a tool that can really be a calculator for creativity in many ways, help humans solve problems they couldn't without it. You just, like the internet, it's going to be an incredibly useful tool. It will have pros, it will have cons, there are dangers, but there are, in aggregate, tremendous upside. And as long as they're used the right way, like on the internet, you don't believe everything you read on the internet, I hope. You shouldn't believe everything you hear from an LLM. But man, what an incredible tool for knowledge and creativity.
So what, and I think you've just answered part of it, what most excites you about chatbots and this technology moving forward into the future?
I think the potential to help humanity is unprecedented. And if you look at, there's lots of technologies that come up and are the next big thing, the rage, right? Is it quantum computing? Is it blockchain? Is it whatever? Fusion. Many technologies have the potential to change humanity, but I get excited when I ask the question, can I do something with this tool that I could not have done without it? And with quantum computing, with blockchain, with many of these things, fusion, I'm like, not yet, not yet. Not saying they can't, you won't. But with this type of LLMs, already you can argue that human knowledge has greatly increased in a way that we never could have done with before this tool. So I'll give you an example. There are multiple 50-year math problems, unsolved math problems, that were recently solved with AI. Multiple. Bin packing problem, matrix algorithms have been accelerated with new techniques that AI helped discover. If you look at protein folding, really understanding human life, we had something like 100,000, for 100,000 proteins, we had good knowledge about how they fold and how they can be combined, and that's super useful. Well, thanks to AI, DeepMind's protein folding project, we have now solved that. We went from 100,000 known protein shapes to 200 million. Basically, every known protein we can accurately predict. This is knowledge. Could we have gotten there without this? Could we have solved those unsolved math problems? Maybe, but not anytime soon, not in my lifetime, right? And now it's like we went from 100,000 to 200 million every known protein. That is new knowledge, new information that we could not have done without this technology. And that's what excites me. How can we apply it to generate the knowledge and to help us solve all of these huge problems that the world is going to be faced with. I mean, there's cancer, there's hunger, sickness, war, poverty, climate issues, pollution, on and on and on. We need better tools to help us reason, or we're at risk in some ways of surviving as a species.
Which brings us to what do you see as their greatest potential harm? And you just talked about how they could help solve the world's great problems in almost Engelbart fashion. What about that they can also create existential problems?
Sure. So I'll pick two. And I'll purposefully not pick one that everyone focuses on. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, is AGI going to happen? Is this going to take all our jobs? Is this going to become smarter than humans? Are we just going to be their slaves? All of that side, I don't believe is a risk anytime soon. Could it happen? Yes, but I don't think with the current technologies that we have, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. I'm relatively confident. So that's not the risk that I worry about. I think of AI as a tool for humans. So what are the two things that worry me the most? One is the energy and the consumptive nature is massive, massive. Today, it takes tens of millions of dollars to train a model. Soon, it's going to take $1 billion to train a model. It may get to $1 trillion. Now, what is it? What's being spent? We're mining huge amounts of chips. NVIDIA is just killing it in the market because the demand for these high performance compute chips is massive. And these things take energy that we've never seen it. And it's growing at the need is growing at seemingly an exponential rate. So just the sheer exponential consumption need scares the heck out of me. So that's number one. Number two, I mentioned this is a tool that can be wielded by humans. And it's a powerful tool for many things, including for persuasion. Already, media and algorithms have contributed significantly to the divisiveness in our country. I've never seen it worse in my lifetime. And these tools can be wielded by humans to be persuasive, more persuasive. There have been studies and experiments, one at EPFL, that took groups of users, groups of people, and humans and AI would try to persuade someone to change their opinion. And it turns that GPT-4, one of the latest models, outperformed humans on the ability to get humans to switch. And it's for a variety of reasons. They know the right levels of empathy, they have the right tone and authority. They leverage these persuasion tools better than humans do. And if you give additional profile data, if you know something about the human you're trying to persuade, they greatly outperform humans. Humans are actually not that good at taking background, just demographic knowledge and knowing how to change your persuasion story. AI is amazing at that. So you could imagine bad actors who are not even bad actors. You can imagine actors who are trying to convince a large set of population to believe certain things or to have certain viewpoints. This will be the greatest tool of mass persuasion that maybe we've ever had. So that's another area. How do you tell what's true when we can fabricate an entire universe of correlated data and facts and editorials that all lead to certain points? How will that be wielded in ways to separate us and to give certain groups power? That scares me a lot.
And that back in the interview you did 11 years ago with Tom and Dag, you talked about, I think it was you, it was one of you that said the business model for conversational AI was, for advertising, for instance, that you didn't need to use ads in a conventional way. It would know what you were interested in, what you needed, and could essentially recommend. How, if you could say, how do you combine conversational AI in its modern form with business models, and essentially why does that not lead to a worst case of what you're saying about persuasion?
Advertisement and attention is what powers the internet and the web today. It's the business model of much of technology. And that, by the way, is one of the reasons I'm so excited to work at Airbnb. When I asked Brian Chesky, the CEO, what do you want to do with AI anyway? He said, I want to use AI to connect people in the real world. I'm like, what? Don't you sell houses or something? And he gave me this whole story about Airbnb being based on trust and connection and travel as a way to connect real people. And I go, most tech today, there's a bunch of people who want to connect us in the metaverse. I'm not interested in that. And other than that, mostly people want to grab people's attention with ads and media and stream them advertisements from devices. That pretty much sums up for me the state of technology today. So LLMs and this technology will continue to push that. I don't think it's the reason. We already are stuck in that kind of world. It can actually be used for good to help break that and bring divisiveness. It can give you different perspectives. So where today, personalization, you could say personalization is the root of all evil. But you're like, what do you mean? If I type in a query, I want the best possible result. And the more you know about me and my intent, you should be able to give it. Well, that does have this problem of creating pockets where all the cohorts who believe similar things get similar results, and that benefits, but that creates divisiveness. So anyway, I have a lot to say in that area, but I'll keep that short. I do think LLMs will add power to this current trend of serving better ads, etc. It's not the business model I want to pursue. And for me, the business model of conversational AI, one is it's finding areas where it's just going to add so much value. Education, for instance, is such a low-hanging fruit and such a great fit for what this does. My education has always been, here is rote textbook. This is today's lesson, and you must learn these vocabulary words and memorize them, and that's it. Or math equations, or whatever it is. LLMs are maybe not as great as the world's greatest expert in any particular field, but man, they're better than every person in lots of fields. They have the same LLM knows math, knows science, knows poetry, knows French, knows English, knows everything, right? And the ability to do cross-domain investigations is unlike anything I've seen. And the ability to explore according to your passions. I don't have to just learn today's technology, today's vocabulary lesson. I can have a conversation and take it in any language through anywhere I want to go. And by doing that, it lights my passions. I can move through the world of knowledge in a way I could never do that. There should be business models around that, because if it's making me a better learner, a better person, that's inherently valuable and should be monetized in some way. So I like to find problems that real value can come through, and I think there are many of them, and that value gets monetized in a right way, not just media and advertising. And for me, yes, we want to sell more things, but that's not what I aspire to do.
I would just, so you guys, as I understood it 10 years ago, you were saying the future might not be advertising in any recognizable form. It would be that your assistant could recommend things you actually wanted or help you find them.
Yeah,
Is that still sort of a goal that you would see?
but that's really what advertising it's all predictive. So when you go to your Facebook ad and all of a sudden you're looking at a certain pair of shoes, you didn't ask for it. It wasn't a search. It was based on personalization, and browsers share so much information about what you're doing. It feels like before you even asked for it, the thing you were thinking of was staring at you in the face, and they've pushed it there through advertising. So yes, that prediction technology is in full effect today and will get even more so. It reminds me back when we interviewed back probably 11 years ago or whatever, Siri had the approach where you would make a request and it would respond, request response. And Google's version of Siri that they came out with, which was initially called Google Now, took the approach of trying to be a proactive agent and actually do those recommendations. You bring up Google Now and it would try to give you what you wanted before you even asked for it.
I'm feeling lucky.
Yeah, I'm feeling lucky, but on steroids with an assistant. It's really hard to do well because when it works, it's magic. I remember an experience from Clippy in the I don't know, early 90s, where I was trying to find some information. I'm clicking on menu buttons and I'm looking and I'm like, oh, I can't find the function I'm looking for. And I click on the help button and up pops Clippy with an answer to the question I hadn't even asked yet. It was able to infer by just my actions of clicking on menus what I might be looking for. It felt like it read my mind. I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, I haven't even typed in a single question to that help thing yet. It was there with the answer. I'm like, how did it know? When it works, it's magic. But when it doesn't work, it's spam. I mean, it literally is, why am I seeing this? Why is it? And an example, the head of product at the time from Google, he left and did a startup. And he used Google Now and Google Assistant. And his office was right next to a train station. And all day long, his Google Assistant thought he was next to a train station, so he wants the train schedule. It would go, ding, here's the train schedule. Ding, here's the, every time a train passed, he couldn't get it to go away. It was like, it's spam, right? So I would say that, yes, proactively putting things in front of people before they ask is a good thing. It's really hard to do well. I've stayed away from it as much as I can in my career. I prefer the approach that if a user asks for it, make it easy for them to ask, but let, you know, it's not spam if they ask for it. And yeah, but it's always going to be a mix.
Because you guys had talked about the back and forth, and you know Roger's summit of dialogue. I'm sure you remember dialogues way back, but yes. He called it dialogue. He was an AI guy originally because he wanted it to be iterative. So that's sort of, I mean, whereas Google took the opposite approach, and you guys, I think, 11 years ago were very much in that iterative side of a dialogue.
Absolutely. Correct? Every system that I've built for 31 years always had the same philosophy of interaction. One is graphical interfaces are part of it. Like one of the failings of ChatGPT is today, almost every interface is purely text-based. There's a reason every website and every app on your phone doesn't just have a text message interface. Graphical interfaces are great. I told Steve Jobs the first day I met him, here's how I think about it. If it's on the screen, the best way is to click it, directly manipulate it. But if it's off the screen, the best way is to ask for it. And the most seamless, perfect the perfect interface is when you can mix direct manipulation with language so fluidly in a multimodal way, it just feels natural. It's all part of the conversation. So for me, yes, absolutely iterative. People don't, if you know exactly what you want, ask for it and it can be done in one step. But usually people interact with it with an interface and refine and reason and try this and look at that. And that should be done in steps, conversational steps, using graphical interfaces when they're available, language interfaces when they're not available, when it's not appropriate, a perfect combination where the context is in sync no matter what you're doing graphically or language oriented. And you iterate and iterate until the task gets done.
And were you, obviously augmentation has been part of your interest for a long time. Were you aware of like the Oliver assistant that Licklider and Bob Taylor wrote about? Was that an inspiration?
No, I mean, I never met, obviously this was before my time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I didn't know Oliver. But on augmentation and in this era, of course, Doug Engelbart was a huge inspiration in my career. Um, and and so he ran the Augmentation Research Center, the ARC at SRI. And his whole objective was how can you use tools, and in particular computer tools, to augment human intellect, especially for teams, collective teams. And I believe that's absolutely an appropriate vision even today. And he said the reason he pioneered so much of what we use today, from the mouse, from multiple windows, from text editors, from to hyperlinked multimedia documents like the web. He did all of that because he said someday the world will be faced with global complex problems. We need to get smarter at collaboratively working together. And things I've done like change.org, I participated in, and Game Planner, were absolutely a mix to try to augment human intellect using the best AI tools and the best human collaboration tools. So I don't know Oliver, but that generation, that work of how do you use AI and tools to help people think smarter and better together has been very important to me.
And second to last question, so in the interview 11 years ago, one of you mentioned the Knowledge Navigator. I don't think it was you.
Sure.
But I mean, was that a personal inspiration for you at all?
Absolutely. So in '93, when I was starting to think about this assistant that could know and do everything, absolutely I knew about Knowledge Navigator. And also there was a technology company called General Magic, which spun out of Apple originally. They came up with something called Magic App. That group was very much inspired by the Knowledge Navigator vision and approach. So, and really, since Knowledge Navigator was a 1986-87 concept video, that team had been working on trying to realize it and then spun out into General Magic. And I was very eagerly watching General Magic and being influenced by some of their design choices and their pieces. So I think Knowledge Navigator is one of the most important concept videos that we've had. I think Doug Engelbart's was another one that even predates a lot of those concepts with the web and all of that, and he implemented it for real. But those were both big inspirations that when I was starting out on my career path towards building assistants and interfaces that could interact with the world of electronic services and content.
And then finally, what is the most important thing for everyone to understand about chatbots?
What is the most important thing about chatbots? So I don't usually use the term chatbot as much. I always use more like an assistant or a conversational assistant is how I frame it. To me, chatbot feels like it somehow feels shallow and deep, but that's just me. And it feels like it makes, it's all about a text input and a text output. So that's how it comes across to me, or a voice input and a voice output. But it's all about text because we're going to chat. In my framing, conversational assistance, the conversation can be more than just words. It will include words, spoken or text, but it can include graphical interfaces and actions, and it's a much richer interaction. We're having a conversation here with gestures and facial expressions. So for me, it's larger than chat. Chat to me becomes like a text interface. So what's the most important thing? I would say humans want to interact naturally with computers and their tools. And they want their tools to be intelligent and easy to use and able to have common sense. My wife's always like, why does it do this? And why doesn't it just do what I want it to do? Chatbots or conversational assistants strive to have the goal of letting a human express their desires and their tasks in relatively natural ways that will be fulfilled using a level of common sense intelligence in the response, which should make it so much easier, so much more powerful. And so I think that's the goal and the aspiration of, I'll call it chatbots for this context. We've had a breakthrough in the last 5 years around large language models. This is for the first time a computer that actually has a model of understanding about pretty much everything in the world. It knows the little nuances of love and gravity and just how the world works, not only physically, but empathetically and socially and emotionally. It has a model of all of that. And so it has the capacity to elevate the naturalness and the common sense nature of our interactions with these tools in a way that we've never had before. So it's important. And it can help humans do creative tasks, can brainstorm and collaboratively can solve problems that we've never been able to achieve before. So I think the potential is huge, but like the internet and like any other important technology, there are flaws, there are inaccuracies, they can be wielded in tricky ways, there are dangers. So this is something that you should be paying attention to, you should be using in your work. There have been studies that show productivity can greatly increase using these tools. So start using them now, but learn about their flaws, learn how to use them for good, and how, like with the internet, don't believe everything that you see. It's not necessarily true. So.
Excellent.